So thank you for joining us. We'll talk a little bit about the tag management webinar series that we're starting today with the state of cloud tag management. And then we have 5 other additional webinars that are coming following this. Just after reInvent, we'll have on December 15th, a tag management for cost management and FinOps, and then a discussion around security and compliance related to tag management, governance, and then tag management for automation and DevOps, which will be very interesting, and then tag management for performance on March 9th. So let's jump right in and we'll get started on the state of cloud tag management. So on the agenda for today is what are tags and why do they matter? The state of cloud tag management, core tagging challenges, tagging best practices, and a special offer at the end. So we'll take an opportunity to answer some questions at intervals during the discussion, as well as have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And remember to put those questions or comments in the Q&A section. So we'll get started with just an introduction to the panelists that are joining us. And I'll start on your right with Michal Servinsky. He's a cloud engineer here at CloudSaver. Michal helps customers to develop and execute strategy and mature cloud cost management as a practice with our clients, and holds a FinOps professional certificate and is one of only 17 in the world to do so. Jason Weimer works with some of our largest clients at CloudSaver as a project manager and helps to deliver service excellence around proactive cloud cost management at scale in some of the largest, most complex cloud environments. And then Mark Williams is the founder and CEO here at CloudSaver. Mark is a recovering CPA by trade. He was the CFO for a publicly traded firm for a number of years and led one of the largest cybersecurity firms as the CFO and as president. Mark has taken his passion for solving complex business, financial, and technical challenges to start CloudSaver 4 years ago and help drive innovation and high impact results in the cloud cost management space. And my name is Doug Hebert. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at CloudSaver. So we'll get started with identifying what are cloud tags. So tags describe resources that consist of a key and a value pair. And to us, tags equal cloud data. Some examples of cloud tags are keys and values for name, SAP host server, owner, John Smith, application, SAP, the environment is production, the department is operations, and a cost center. So resources can have multiple tags, and all resources should have at least one and can benefit from 5 or more. Tags can be used in a variety of ways, and there's no limit to how you can use tags. So why do cloud tags matter? Tags are foundational to modern cloud management. In order to maximize your digital and cloud transformation investments, organizations must develop a comprehensive strategy to clean up the data in the cloud. That foundation begins with tagging strategy, requires policy, governance, and an organizational understanding of the business and technical value that this data can unlock. You can't track it unless you tag it. So some of the benefits that span the enterprise are unparalleled resource and cost visibility. It drives accountability, enables showback and chargeback, as well as unit cost allocation, enables rich automation, and strengthens security, governance, and compliance. So we'll go to our first question here and ask Jason, how have you used tags to address client challenges?
Sure. So there are a lot of different challenges unique to every client, but I think the number one challenge is how do you monitor cost and usage, right? And I think tags really help out in that situation when you're trying to figure out what is costing you the most money on your bill every month, right? And what is getting the most usage, which application is it coming from, which resources, and who do they belong to. You can't find out all that if you don't have the right tags in place. It's a very difficult exercise to go through all the different resources in your cloud environment and track down who owns it and why they're running it the way they're running it and why they're using as much as they're using. So I think the most important challenge there is trying to monitor cost and usage, and having the right tags definitely helps.
Yeah, Jason, thank you so much. That's fantastic. So we'll start here with the state of cloud tag management, and we'll dive right in talking about cloud growth and the need for cloud tagging. So Gartner predicts that Global spending on public cloud services will reach 600 billion in the year 2023. And that's in excess of the 490 billion that's being spent in 2022. This next slide just shows a little bit about the exponential problem that exponential growth in adoption of the cloud has led to massive cloud tag data volume and a greater need for tag data management. This growth has led to a proliferation of resources, workloads, and applications migrating to the cloud. And as a result of ever increasing amount of resource data from the cloud, the complexity, lack of visibility, and remediation of tag data is hampering organizations and their ability to leverage the promise of the cloud to get speed, agility, and flexibility. So untagged resources is a significant challenge for most organizations, whether they recognize it or not. So for small, mid-size, and large enterprises, 17% of small organizations have that percentage is what they have lacking tag keys. And for mid-size organizations, 95% of their resources lack tag keys. And then for large enterprises, 44% of their resources lack tag keys. And to kind of illustrate this, we'll talk a little bit about compute and serverless here. I love this illustration about untagged resources, particularly for compute. Compute resources have a higher incidence of tagging compared to other resources. And yet 23% of mid-sized organizations remain untagged. In large enterprises, 37% of their total resources are untagged. Then in serverless environments, resources see improved tagging as the organization gets larger. But despite this, 56% of serverless resources are untagged in mid-sized organizations, and 20% are untagged in large enterprises. And we'll take that same messaging to object storage and observability services. Object storage is often overlooked with mid-sized organizations that leads to poor tag coverage and 87% of those resources being untagged. Observability services are almost entirely untagged with small and mid-sized organizations at 97%, while large organizations have 41% of their resources untagged. We'll go to question number 2. And Jason, do these metrics agree with your experience?
Yeah, I think I can say from my experience, there's a lot of different reasons for why you see the metrics that you're seeing, and part of it has to do with smaller organizations have less resources to worry about, right, and less resources to tag, and the tagging is a little bit lighter, right? Less stuff to tag, less tag keys to input, less margin for error. And then as companies grow and they get larger and the organizations grow their cloud environments, it's really hard to keep track of who's doing what and making sure that all the right tags are getting applied to every resource that's getting provisioned into the cloud. And so it's definitely something that's perpetual, right? And it's an exercise that doesn't stop, right? You have to constantly maintain your tag hygiene and go back and make sure you plug up any holes if it comes from automation or someone pressing a button somewhere. But the metrics definitely make sense.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jason. We'll pass it on to Mark Williams here to talk a little bit about core tagging challenges.
Hey, thanks, Doug. So Doug spent quite a bit of time talking about the importance of tags. It really is a foundational component to modern cloud management. And you would think that given its relative importance, that companies would have a good handle on this, but does not appear to be the case for all size organizations. There was a recent study that came out that said that 86% of companies have very poor tag hygiene. And so the obvious question is why? Why are companies struggling to put tags on there when they're so useful in so many different areas? Well, we've got to boil it down to 4 primary challenges. The first one is what we call tag coverage, and then there's compliance, completeness, and then clarity. So when we talk about tag coverage, what we're really talking about here is, are companies putting tags on resources at all? And Doug kind of mentioned earlier, but you can't track it unless you put a tag on it, right? So if you're not using tagging at all, then you lose the ability to do all the analysis on the back end, whether you're looking at costs or observability data. Just having tags in place is absolutely critical to that whole process. The next big challenge is compliance. When we talk about compliance, what we're really talking about is have you determined like what the standard is that you want for your cloud resources? In other words, do you want every cloud resource to have these 6 standard golden tags, right? But if you don't set that expectation of what you want that tag environment to look like, then you don't have any way to measure overall compliance on it. So it's important that you use tag policies, because policies will allow you to set those standards and then be able to determine which resources are compliant, which ones aren't, and then you can start to improve the quality of your tagging environment as you go along. The next challenge is what we call tag completeness. And this means that are you tagging all of the different components for a particular cloud resource? So for example, when you think of a cloud resource, you can't think of it as a single entity. It's really the assembly of, think of it as a parent and a bunch of children. So if we're like a standard like EC2 instance, you might have a compute component, which might be the parent, but you also have an ABS volume and elastic IP. There's actually 19 separate taggable subcomponents to an EC2. And when we talk about tag completeness, what we're saying is that you can't just tag the parent, right? You can't just tag the compute. You need to tag all of the individual pieces of that cloud resource, because every single one of those subcomponents has cost associated with it, has usage, and it has all the observability data that if you're not putting tags on all the pieces, you can't analyze it on the back end. And then the last kind of major challenge that we'll talk through is what we call clarity. And really what we're talking about here is syntax issues. So in other words, a very common tag key might be application. Well, we have one client that has figured out 15 different ways to misspell or misuse the word application. Real world example, right? And the problem is that all of these, the tagging systems all rely on using the same tag key. So it views application with a capital A as a big tag separate apart from application with a lowercase a. And so what people have is they end up with this broad collection of variant spellings of a particular tag key, and it creates all sorts of problems to be able to aggregate your data and look at everything together. So there's some other challenges that are out there as well. First is tag and resource visibility. So in other words, there's not really a place where you can say, hey, what does my tagging environment look like, right? Which resources have which tags on them? How many of them are compliant with different tagging policies? And so to a large degree, companies today are relatively blind in terms of understanding where do I even start? What does my tagging environment even look like? Also, processing batch and bulk changes to your tagging environment is a significant challenge. Let's just take a very simple example. Let's just say you have an employee that has 100 cloud resources that they're responsible for, and every one of those resources has an owner tag that says the owner equals Mike. And let's say Mike leaves the organization and a new guy comes in. And so how do you need to obviously update those owner tags so that you can transfer the ownership from the old person to the new person. There's not really an effective way right now to say, hey, show me all of Mike's stuff, select all, and do a batch processing to change all of Mike's stuff to the new guy's name, right? It's right now what happens is you either have to go into each individual resource and manually update it, or you end up writing a script to try and do a batch change manually through a script, but you don't really have any way to validate to make sure you actually caught everything along the way. Also, when you start to introduce things like multi-cloud into tagging, it adds another layer of complexity. So in other words, tagging can be applied at an account level within a cloud environment, but you have multiple accounts, right? And that's just within like an AWS or an Azure environment. But what happens when you're using AWS, Azure, and GCP, right? And you're trying to harmonize all of your tagging language and all of your policies across a multi-cloud environment. It becomes very, very challenging to try and get consistency across your tagging standards when you're in a multi-cloud environment. Another issue that's out there relates to tag policies. And when like for an AWS, for example, if you create a tag policy or you change or update a tag policy, those changes are prospective. So in other words, any new resource that comes on board, they will be bound towards whatever that policy is, but they're not backwards looking. They're not going to go back and say, all these other resources that are out there right now, they're not being evaluated against that same policy. And that creates a landscape that's frankly littered with non-compliant resources. So it doesn't do a good job of cleaning up the old stuff. And it kind of that runs into the next topic that we have, which is really compliance monitoring. So let's just say you go out there and you do put some tag policies in place. How do you monitor your entire environment to make sure that you know how many of my resources actually comply with this policy? And more importantly, which ones don't, so I can identify them and go out and remediate those and actually update their tags so they do comply with the policy. Tagging automation is also kind of the holy grail in the tagging world, right? So the concept here is like if I were to stand up in EC2, we talked about you have the need to tag not just the compute, but also all the subcomponents associated with that. But right now you have to go into every single resource and basically copy those tags, individually. And that can be very time consuming, especially when you're dealing with volume of resources that a lot of these larger enterprise organizations are dealing with. And so there's no ability to go out there and say, hey, go out there and find the parent for this resource, and find everything that's attached to it, and copy all the tags from the parent to all of these subcomponents automatically. That way you put the tagging information once and then everything kind of flows through. That functionality just doesn't exist with today's technology. And then you also, the last thing here we'll talk about is really what we call untaggable resources. So there are, not every resource is open to be tagged, and not every cost that you have can be tagged. And so that creates some additional challenges along the way. So let's open up to a question here for Mihal. Mihal, which of these four kind of major challenges that we talked about, between coverage, compliance, completeness, and clarity, which one do you see most often with your clients?
Thanks, Mark. In most cases, customers struggle a little bit with everything, but the most common one is the tag clarity issue. Why? That's quite simple. We are all humans. We all do make errors and misspelled keys, values. Those that can happen to everyone. Even assuming that we have our whole infrastructure as a code, perfect. But somebody wrote that code, and then again, once again, we may have an error there, and such mistakes are pretty hard to avoid without proper tools and monitoring in place.
Great, thanks, Mihal. And I'm just going to pass it over to you to talk about some of the tagging best practices.
Right, perfect. So when we are talking about tagging, and tag policies, let's start with planning. So first up, strategic tag policies. That's the long-term goal, the big picture, basically what we want to achieve. To do so, we can identify the golden tags, which are the tag keys that we will need to further process the data to make something out of it. And for example, it can be name, owner, application, environment, department, cost center, or anything else that you can think of that could be useful in your use case. Then we have tactical tag policies. Those will tell you how you can do that, when and with what. So for example, what are applicable values to the keys, to the golden tags? Can the application be spelled? Can the application have multiple values or only a few specific ones that you listed? Will it be strictly enforced, or will it be created only as a document, or also implemented in the cloud environment and then enforced there? But then again, there's yet another challenge there. The CSPs don't really make it that easy to enforce, those policies there. Once we've got that tag policy, let's think about validation and rationalization, because the first drafts aren't always flawless. We can almost always improve something. So first off, simplicity. Let's try to make those policies as simple as possible. Why? Mostly because they are easy to maintain. Then they are easy to enforce, and most importantly, they are easy to understand for users. And why is that important? Because if it's something that we don't have to spend too much time on to digest, then there's a high chance that you will not see that big of a pushback from the end users that will actually be using the resources and tagging them. Then we've got the coverage piece. So does this policy apply to all services or only few ones? Should it be enforced on all accounts or only few of them? And applicability. So basically, it's about use cases. So does this policy apply to all use cases that you encounter or that you might encounter in the future? If yes, then that's perfect. But if not, we can create multiple tag policies that will address all of the issues or use cases that you might be dealing with. And we've got, once we've got the tag policy created, validated, then we need to clean up the environment. That's in here. We've got a lot included about what Mark taught on the tag clarity. So we want to unify the keys and values. If we've got application misspelled 15 times, let's unify it. Let's pick only one version of it and keep using it. The very same thing applied to values. If you've got SAP spelled all in uppercase, and we are good with that, let's use that as a standard. Then we've got dependencies. In case that you have any automation or any other system depending on tag values and keys, let's make sure that you adjust all of those systems, all of those dependencies before you actually change the tags, because if not, those may fail eventually. And well, if we are doing it right, let's avoid any issues. And activating new tag keys. That's something that I've seen that quite a lot of customers tend to forget about. At least in AWS, it doesn't happen in Azure and GCP, but in AWS, if you are using a new tag key and you want to use it for billing purposes, be it showback or chargeback, and you want to see that tag key and its values appear in billing data, you need to activate it in the billing console. If you don't do that, all the data is all gone. So that's a very important piece to remember about. And we've got tag policy compliance, CI/CD. So cloud is evolving, your environments are evolving, and the business will be changing. So what we need to do is we need to monitor compliance and coverage. We need to know whether there are any resources that are untagged or mistagged. If there is anything out of ordinary, then adjusting policies. We need to regularly review the policies as they may become obsolete. Some projects may not longer be developed, but also the requirements may change. you might be thinking about introducing some new approach, and then you need to start using a different set of tag keys because of some other requirements. Then we need to adjust the policy so that it will still be applicable to your use case. And then tag resources and enable automation. In perfect world, you will have the tagging automated, and then based on the tagging, you will also be able to create other automation. As for now, it might not be that easy, but that's the perfect world. And at last, repeat. So all of those steps, those are continuous. They never end, and that's something that has to be done continually.
Thank you, Mihal. I'll go to another question for you. Which of these best practices do your clients struggle with the most? So with regard to tag policy planning, validation and rationalization, cleanup, and then compliance.
Yeah, so quite a lot of issues. Well, let me split that into two parts. First of all, most of the customers that I've worked with don't have any tag policies at all. So that's pretty much it. They are aware that they do have some issues with that, but they don't have any standardization in place. Which leads basically to an answer that tag policy planning is non-existent in quite a lot of cases. Many customers know that they do they have to do something about it, but they don't know how to approach it, and that's probably the biggest issue, the biggest challenge.
Mihal, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. I think the panelists have illustrated a little bit of the challenges that most organizations have around operationalizing the cloud and how tags are really critical to the data layer, if you will, building a foundation so that you can do cloud cost management, so that you can do automation more effectively. That's really part of what CloudSaver has really been working on for about a year here. We've been delivering outcomes to clients with proprietary technology and service delivery to optimize cost and performance. But we're excited to bring a new product to market at reInvent this month to address the host of business and technical challenges that we described today. Tag Manager is that product that we're launching, and it'll be available at the end of November. We'd like to extend a free trial to those of you attending the webinar today. So you can just go to cloudsaver.com/free tags and register for your free trial. We'll also be at reInvent. I mentioned that at the start of the webinar here. We'll be at booth 1251 for any of you that are attending. And we'd love to have you join us so we can give you a demo and just visit some more about, again, some of the challenges that you might be having, specifically around that data layer and tagging, but then also how Tag Manager specifically is addressing those challenges that impact those 5 domains that we talked about: security, governance, automation, etc. So also you can reach us at sales@cloudsaver.com if you'd like to have a conversation and see a demo ahead of that. But we look forward to seeing you there at reInvent if you're attending. I also mentioned earlier some upcoming webinars. The second one that we have just after reInvent on December 15th is Tag Management for Cost Management and FinOps. And then again, Security, Compliance, Governance, Automation, and Performance on March 9th. So we'll quickly go over just a couple of questions that we got from the group here. And so the first question that we had here is, when will this be available, Tag Manager, that is, for Microsoft Azure? So our intent is to have it available when we launch the product, about the time that we are going to reInvent here in just a couple of weeks. So great question, thank you. A second question that we have is, We're a large enterprise with many resource owners. How have you been able to get buy-in across resource owners? And I think maybe Jason, this might be a great question for you to take on, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. I can speak to that. So I think in the past, we definitely see different clients that struggle with tagging all their resources. And, talking to the different resource owners and application teams, I think getting them to understand the necessity of it is the important part, right? Taking them through the invoice and taking them through the resources and just seeing if they can identify their costs and usage, right? I think once they kind of fail to see that, it's easily identifiable, right? I could just look at a resource in the cloud and say it's mine, or say how much it costs, month over month. They start to understand the necessity, right? And I think that's what's worked, at least for me in my experience in the past, with getting people to, really see that this is something they need, right? They need to do. They need to get everyone else on their team on board with it, and making it consistent enough where you can get the data you're looking for, and get some valid reports on costs. I think as the companies grow, that's always the question, right? How much is it costing?
Thank you, Jason. That's great. I've got one other question here. How do you go about finding tag variants? So I may give this to Mark, just to have him touch on that just briefly.
Yeah, so tag variants, when we talk about tag variants, just to recap, this is the different ways that you can spell, application, whether it's application with a capital A or little a, et cetera, all the different variants associated with that. There's actually some really sophisticated algorithms that will go out and analyze all of your tag keys or your values, and it will go out there and look for things that look like they belong together. In other words, you may have 10 different keys that look like there's some variation of application. And so there's some algorithms that kind of pull those together to kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. I know when we have our tag manager solution, we integrated that capability to be able to pull those together so you can see all the unique keys and values and see those variants all in one place. And then also have the ability to do some batch processing so you can update and unify all those naming standards very, very quickly.
Great question, and thank you, Mark, so much for that. I appreciate it. I think we had one other question that was asking about, again, where we're going to be at the booth and perhaps some contact information. So I got that slide back up. Let's see if there are any other questions. One question that we have is, how does Tag Manager differ from the CSP's native tools? And I may give that to Mark as well. So each of the CSPs handle tags and management of tags, policy around tags in different ways, but they're similar in nature. But we'll give this question to Mark, and he can describe a little bit about how Tag Manager is going to address that challenge.
Sure. I mean, there's a whole host of differentiators with our solution versus what the native CSP tools that are out there. And frankly, we built this tool because the native tools that were out there really didn't address this issue as strongly as we needed to. Again, we live in this world all day, every day. And so tagging for us is absolutely instrumental. And so we had to build our own tool that basically solved a lot of the shortfalls of the native tools that are out there. So to start out with, just giving basic visibility into your tagging environment. In other words, which resources have tags and which ones are complying with different policies. We actually have a solution called Tag Explorer. Think of it as a really advanced query engine that's strictly around your tagging environment. So I can very quickly, let's say, here's my entire universe of tags, and apply different filters to it. Say, show me everything where Mark is the owner, or for a specific application or environment, that sort of stuff. And then I can say, show me a list of things, select all, change these tags from X to Y, or do different things in a batch format. So being able to elegantly understand what your environment looks like, narrow it down to a field of a view of things that you care about, and then do broad changes with those is one of those. But also things like tag automation is also absolutely important. Being able to unify your naming standards. So in other words, we talked about doing all of the different variations of application. We can bring those all together and very quickly select the incorrect spellings and rename those those keys or values to whatever the standard naming convention is going to be. So there's a ton of functionality that's out there and available. Probably too much to go on this specific question, but there's a complete list of functionality that's going to be on our product page as soon as we launch this that will really unpack it in more detail.
Thank you, Mark, for the response. I think you answered one or two additional questions that came in specifically about Tag Manager being able to create unique tag IDs. And you covered that, I think, with the unique unifying naming standards that Tag Manager really enables. Let me see if we have one or two others.
I'm going to talk about one other item on that too, which is also really kind of unique with our solution. What we've also done is not only do we show you your tag environment, but we actually we've created what we call a tag health score. And so we're going to evaluate your the overall health of your tagging environment and be able to tell you specifically where your problems are. So do you have a completeness issue? Do you have a coverage issue? Do you have a syntax issue? All of those types of things. So you can very quickly find out where the problems are and then drill down to those specific underlying items and repair those tags so that you can improve your score and enhance the overall effectiveness of your tagging environment.
Excellent. I think that covers most of the questions that we have. Mark, thanks for those responses. That's really helpful. I know that there's a number of you that would like to see Tag Manager, so we look forward to illustrating some of those capabilities and the outcomes that you can get from Tag Manager. Again, reach out to us at sales@cloudsaver.com, or if you're attending reInvent, we look forward to seeing you there. And again, if you have any other questions, we look forward to answering those. We'll be sending this webinar out to all of the folks that joined the series. Thank you again so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate you taking the time and look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great afternoon.